Schlage L series mortise locks. We're also going to participate or cover some cylindrical lock sets. We're also going to talk about deadbolts. And this course is designed to give you a brief introduction to some of our products, some of the features, some of the design element. We'll touch lightly on some of the part numbering system for the products as well. So just to give you a little background on myself, I am a locksmith for over 30 years. I'm a Schlage Senior Product Training Manager. I've been training for Schlage for the past 12 years. I am based in Roanoke, Virginia, which is in the southwest corner of the state. So it's a pleasure to have all of you with us here today. Just so we get to know each other a little bit better, if you would please do me a favor and type into chat where you are located and what your job title or position is. So get an idea of who's participating today. And I see we've got over 40 people participating, so glad you're taking advantage of these webinar offerings. Okay, so it looks like we've got folks from pretty much all over the U.S., variety of experience. We've got some additional folks from Allegion, got some folks working in distribution, got some project coordinators, some estimators, locksmith. We got some folks from our Canadian location. Good to have you with us. Operations manager. Another individual from my home state of Virginia. Okay, great. Well, that gets us to know each other a little bit better, so thank you for participating in that. Gives you a little bit of a warm-up for typing information into chat. Now, just as a reminder, this session is being recorded, so of course your name will be appearing in the chat window, so just be aware of that fact. And we'll jump right into our agenda next. All right, so we're going to be covering our ND series, which I mentioned previously. That is a commercial grade 1 product. We'll be talking about some of the most common functions that are available in our ND series. And we'll be going through some nomenclature, some terms, some part numbers for the product numbers. Then we'll also move into the L series, which is our grade 1 commercial mortise lock set. And once again, we'll be covering the different grades that we have available, talk about a variety of different functions and nomenclature as well. And then we'll move into our B series deadbolts, once again covering the grades, the functions, and the nomenclature. Then after I take you through all of those various products, we'll give you some scenarios, give you an opportunity to apply some of that information that we've covered in today's webinar. All right, so we're going to start out with the 3 major types of locks that are available. So what you're looking at right now is a mortise pocket that's cut into the edge of a door. Mortise is a woodworking term. It simply means a pocket that's cut into the edge of the door. Into that mortise pocket or cutout goes a mortise lock set. So you can see how the body itself slides into that pocket. The majority of the hardware itself is actually hidden inside the door. You can see a couple of lever handles extending outward, and then from the edge of the door you can see a latch bolt extending outward as well. So we'll be talking about mortise locks during today's webinar. Here we have a round or circular hole cut in the face of the door and also a round hole cut on the edge of the door. This is going to accept a cylindrical lock set, sometimes referred to as a board lock. And cylindrical locks are a little bit easier and quicker to install than a mortise lock, and we'll be taking a look at that as we move through the webinar today. And here you can see we've got that similar cylindrical lock cut out, 2 circular holes drilled through the face and edge of the door, and into that we're going to install a deadbolt, sometimes referred to as an auxiliary lock set. Okay, so we'll start out with our ND series cylindrical lock. So we start out with a little bit of history. Schlage was started by Walter Schlage, so there was actually an individual named Schlage. So this occurred in the early 20th century. At the time, mortise locks were the predominant locks being installed on doors. And I mentioned earlier, mortise locks are a little bit more labor intensive to install. When mortise locks were being installed at that point, power portable drills were not readily available. So if you had to drill a mortise pocket, you would take a brace and a bit and you would hand crank a series of holes in the door. Then you'd go out, clean it out the holes with a chisel, and slide the mortise lock case into the door. So it was a very labor-intensive process. So Walter Schlage was aware of that fact, and he invented the push-button cylindrical lock. Now, that was not the very first cylindrical lock, but Walter Schlage is credited with inventing the first push-button cylindrical lock. The push-button was located on the inside of the knob. You would push the button in to lock the door. As soon as you rotated the inside knob, the button would pop out and the door would unlock. So that is Walter Schlage's claim to fame. So we go into next the ANSI and the BHMA requirements for a cylindrical lock set. And when we talk about ANSI, ANSI stands for the American National Standards Institute, and they work in conjunction with BHMA, which is the Builders Hardware Manufacturers Association. These are a variety of different lock manufacturers that belong to this association, and they come to a consensus as to what the criteria, what would be the design elements or the testing requirements for different grades of locks. And we'll be talking about grades of locks. There are simply 3 grades for you to be familiar with. Grade 1 is a heavy-duty commercial lock. Grade 2 would be a light-duty commercial lock, and grade 3 would be used for residential. So here we have the ANSI standard listed for you. It's A156.2. That's the standard assigned to cylindrical lock sets. So to be a grade 1 lock set, now keep in mind that is the heaviest duty grade that you can get for a commercial lock set. There are a variety of tests that have to be performed on the lock. Now we're not going to go into a lot of detail because there's only a few of those that you're going to be primarily interested in. So there are operational tests. How long does the lock last? Security test. How secure? How much does it resist vandalism or attack? How strong is it? What about the material itself? What is the material made of? What about rust resistance? What about resistance to ultraviolet rays from the sun? That would apply to the finish test. And finally, what we're probably most concerned with are the cycle tests. How long will the lock last for a variety of different applications? So let's take a look at those cycle tests. So a grade 1 lock must meet a minimum of 1 million cycles of operation. Grade 2, by comparison, has to meet 800,000 cycles of operations. Now, these are only minimum standards, and Schlage lock sets will far exceed those minimum standards. So you can't always consider the fact that all grade 1 locks are created equal because some of them only meet the minimum standards, and other manufacturers such as Schlage will far exceed those grade 1 standards. So there are a total of 23 tests that must be passed, in summary, for the lock to meet that grade 1 standard. All right, so Schlage locks are tested to failure. All right, so we want to make sure that we meet that 1 million cycles of operation. But the ND series lock by Schlage, we have tested those to over 5 million cycles. So you can begin to see how the locks far exceed the minimum ANSI BHMA standards. So how does that compare? How does that translate to real life examples? So here we have an example for a office or a stairwell lock. So you can expect approximately 500 uses per day. So if we multiply that out, you can see here we'd get 500 per day in this box right here. We've got 365 days a year, over 182,000 uses per year. So that would represent about 5.5 years life expectancy for the lock. So that just gives you an example of how long the locks will last. That might be longer or less than you might expect, but if you've got a door that's used very, very heavily, you may actually end up having to replace that lock a little bit more frequently than you might expect. So these are some of the reasons why the grades are very important to you when you're making your decision as to what lock you're going to install. because it's going to determine how long the lock is going to last. All right, so we're going to move into some nomenclature now. These are the numbers that are associated with assembling a complete part number when you are ordering the product. Bruce does have some documents for you that you will be able to download at the end of the webinar today. So here's an example of that nomenclature that we have. So we'll give you an opportunity to download that if you want. You can reference that during today's course. All the information will be provided on the screen, so I do recommend that you follow along on the screen as we go through the webinar. So that is the nomenclature. This will help you understand some of the options that are available when you're ordering the ND series lock sets. Okay, so we're going to start out with our first placeholder here. You have a choice of going with the ND mechanical lock, grade 1 mechanical lock. That would be the ND in that placeholder. Or if you go with an NDE, that would be for our wireless lock. Now, we're not going to go into a lot of detail on the electronic version of our lock sets, but we do want you to be aware of that we do have a full portfolio of electronic access control devices in the ND series. Our next placeholder would be for the functions themselves. Now, we've got well over 24 different functions to choose from, but if you become familiar with approximately 5 or 6 of these would represent probably over 90% of the functions that you would ever run into out in the field. So we've got some of our common functions listed here. Passage set, for example, that would be a 10 series. 40 would be privacy, 50 is office, 70 is classroom, 75 is classroom security, and 80 is storeroom. And as I mentioned, we do have many more functions to choose from, but these are the ones that you are most likely to run into out in the field or when you're making a proposal or writing a specification for a project. All right, so let's take a look at what we have for some of our functionality here. So with every function, you're going to see an icon or a picture associated with it. It's going to describe to you either both the outside and the inside operation of the lock. So here you can see very plainly, and this is kind of self-evident, that there's a key on the outside for this particular lock set, and on the inside there's a push button. Because it is a locking function, there's something called a dead latch, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on that later on. Here we have an example of something that is not used quite as frequently, but they are available with a blank plate on the outside. So you might want to use this on, let's say, a warehouse door, the exterior, where you don't want anything extending off the outside of the door. That would make it a little bit more prone to vandalism. Now on the inside here, we have an example of a push button. So this one you can actually push in and turn, and when you do that, it's going to stay in. So when you push down on the inside lever, that button will not pop out if it is in the turn position. It will, in fact, stay locked. So that's one way to identify the operation of the functions, by looking at these pictures. And then also, in addition to that, we would have a full written description for the operation as well. All right, so we're going to start out with the passage function. That would be our ND10S series. Now in a passage function, both the inside and outside are always free. There is simply a latch on the edge of the door. There is no dead latch. And if you would please go ahead and type into chat, where do you think you might end up using a passage set? What kind of door or room might you find a passage function being installed? So you got comments: a stair, closet, a couple closets, corridor, closet, lots of closets coming through here. Okay, closet, conference room, kitchen. Okay, so we can see that there are, in fact, a lot of options available. Typically, these would be used on doors that just need to be latched. So especially doors like stairwells, fire stairwell doors would have to be latched at all times. To meet life safety codes, they must be self-closing and self-latching. So I do want to indicate to you that this is a common function, in addition to areas like closets. Stairwell doors that don't need to be locked, they do need to be latched at all times, would use a passage function. Next one would be a 40S. This is a bath or bedroom, or sometimes referred to as a privacy lock. And you can see in this particular function there is a push button on the inside, so that would allow you to lock the outside lever and give you some privacy. No key on the outside, but there might be some type of an emergency release. This would generally take the form of either a slot that you could use a coin, or a hole that you could insert a small flat blade screwdriver to release the inside button. So if you need to get in an emergency, you can do so without having to use a key. So the inside is always free for immediate egress. The outside is free unless it's locked by the button on the inside. So that would be a privacy type function. Next one, we're going to take a look at an office lock. This is one of our other very common functions that would be used in a wide variety of applications. So for this one, it's an ND50PD, an office lock, and that one does have a push button on the inside, obviously a key on the inside. Now, because this one is key locking, there's going to be a dead latching feature. Dead latch has a two-piece design. You've got the larger beveled latch here, and you got a small finger on the side. That dead latch, when the door is closed, is going to hit the strike plate. That little finger is going to be pushed in, and then the latch bolt itself is no longer spring-loaded. That will prevent the lock from being slipped with a piece of plastic or a credit card. So that's where we get the dead locking action taking place. So you push the button on the inside, that locks the outside lever. As soon as you use a key on the outside or push down on the inside lever, the outside lever is going to unlock. Keep in mind that this one you cannot lock with a key from the outside. To lock this, if you're leaving, you would open the door, push in the button, slam the door behind you, and it would lock. So this one, the key only unlocks from the outside. It does not lock the door from the outside. All right, our next one is an ND70PD, which is a classroom function. And you will begin to notice that oftentimes the name of the function is the type of door or room where that lock will be installed. So that's going to help you understand or remember the different function names. So classroom, key on the outside. All right. There's no button on the inside. The inside lever is always free for immediate egress. This lock is locked and unlocked only by using a key on the outside. All right. So this would be a typical classroom function. Key on the outside locks and unlocks the outside lever. There is no button. There is no turn on the inside. The inside is always free for immediate egress. Okay. Now, using this on a classroom door, if you would please type into chat, what might be the limitation of using this lock if there was an emergency lockdown situation and you needed to secure the classroom? Go ahead and type into chat, what would be the limitation or problem? Okay, so we got a comment, cannot be locked without key in an emergency, have to open the door to lock the outside, need to exit it, you need a key, you can't lock it from the inside. You might have an intruder, right? An active shooter situation. This would be a consideration. Okay, thank you for your comments on that. Yes, so the teacher would have to step outside into the hallway in harm's way in order to lock down that door. Teacher would also have to have ready access to the key to do so as well. So in the active shooter situation, a classroom lock may not be the correct function to choose from. All right, so that being said, we've got lock functions that are evolving here. So we start out with the classroom lock, and that is locked and unlocked with a key from the outside. So here's our example of that classroom security lock. That one has a key on both sides of the door. So you have either key can lock or unlock the outside lever. That means that the teacher can lock the classroom door from the inside using a key. But a key is not required to exit the room. The inside lever is always free for immediate egress. All right. So that's going to help protect the teachers. They do not have to step outside into the hallway to lock the door. But what might be a disadvantage of this function in an emergency lockdown situation? I think some of you alluded to that in your previous chat responses, but once again, what would be the problem with this lock in a lockdown situation? Okay, you have to have the key ready. You need time to find the key. Still requires a key. You are correct. So it does require a key, and you have to have access to that key. Now, if you stop and think about it, the use of a key is considered a fine motor skill. All right, so you are correct. First of all, you have to find the key. You have to have the key with you, ready access. So if you can imagine getting an emergency lockdown command, teachers may have even heard gunshots being fired. Now they got to find their key. Now their hand's probably shaking at that point. They've got to get the key into the keyhole. Then they have to know which direction to turn it in to ensure that it is locked correctly. And in addition to that, because it's always unlocked from the inside, the teacher has no way on a cylindrical lock set to verify that they have actually locked it down correctly. So there's a lot of things to consider here. A lot of good comments coming through in chat. So there are other options. Some school districts will consider other options as well. So you do need to keep in mind that with every lock function, there are advantages and disadvantages. A single lock cannot do everything. So you have to take those into consideration, the advantages and disadvantages. Now, where I'm from, for Virginia, where we had the Virginia Tech school shootings, the administrators decided to go with an office function on the classroom because they didn't want teachers to have to worry about having a key, finding a key and using those motor skills. Jim is saying, here's how I specify an electric lock. Okay, so we got a complete part number. All right, so there are electrified options as well. You can use magnetic hold opens, you can use electronic access control devices, you can use network locks as well that will allow you to lock down the doors all at one time from a remote location. So electronic access control devices are also consideration as well. All right, so let's move on to our next function. We've got a storeroom lock next. That would be our ND80. And a storeroom lock is locked at all times. So you can see we do have, once again, a key on the outside. We have no button on the inside. The outside lever is always going to be locked. The key will momentarily retract the latch. As soon as you remove the key, it's going to relock. So storage rooms, or you might use it in a place like a record room where you have patient records being stored. You want to make sure that that door is locked at all times. We have, in some situation or some instances, found where schools were actually using a storeroom function on a classroom because they wanted the classroom doors to be locked at all times. They didn't want teachers to have to worry about a key. They didn't want teachers to forget to lock the door. But if you would please type into chat, what do you think would be kind of unintended consequence, if you will, if you tried using a storeroom lock on a classroom? What do you think might happen with those doors? Okay, you get locked out if you don't have your key. Doors propped open all the time. Yes, so that would be a potential. Doors are being propped open because you don't want to, teacher doesn't want to have to let students in if they're late or if they've gone to use the restroom. You definitely can't keep it unlocked, right, unless you leave it propped open. And if it's a fire-rated door, that's going to be in violation of life safety codes. Fire-rated doors must be self-closing and self-latching. They must be latched at all times. They don't have to be locked, but they do have to be latched at all times. So once again, there's an example of an advantage and a disadvantage with a particular function. All right, so that is storeroom. So lock function then, once again, is a set of operational behaviors for the lock. So we just went through those different functions. So examples of that would be the outside lever is fixed, entrance by a key only, which would be a storeroom function, inside lever always free for immediate egress, and that would be typical for just about all the functions we have, with the exception of the asylum or institutional function, which is very rare. All right, so here we have our example. These would be the behaviors for the storeroom lock function. Outside lever always fixed, entrance by a key only, inside lever always free for immediate egress. All right, so ANSI is going to give specific numbers to those various functions. So the ANSI number for a storeroom function, for example, is an F86. Now, where is this going to come in handy, or where is this important? Well, if you are retrofitting, you are changing from one manufacturer's lock set to another. There are different manufacturers obviously will have different model numbers for their products. So if you want to make sure that a storeroom function, let's say Yale, is the same as a Schlage storeroom function, let's say you're replacing the Yale with a Schlage lock set, you can look in both manufacturers' catalog, verify they both have the same ANSI number, and then you can be assured that a storeroom function in Schlage is going to operate the same way a storeroom function in Yale operates as well. Now, there may still be some slight variations on the door prep, but the lock function will operate the same way. All right, so here we have some lock functions, so you can respond to this in chat. So we've got a manufacturing facility that has a room that's used for conducting interviews for potential workers. We need to have a lock set that can be easily locked from the inside. So we got inside locking. So I'd ask you to choose which of these three functions would you select: office, privacy, or storeroom. So I'll give you a chance to read through that and make your choice. Okay, we got a choice for an office, we got a choice for privacy, privacy or office, another privacy, privacy, another office, privacy. Okay, thank you for your response on that. All right, so we got a choice between privacy and office. So the only bit of information we don't know is, does the customer want it to be unlocked with a key on the outside, or do they just need a privacy function? So we'd actually have to ask the customer for a little bit more detail if we wanted to make a final determination as to the function. Okay, now this one I'll let you read on your own. And as soon as you read through that, you can make your choice as to what you would recommend for this particular application. We've got a wine cellar in a restaurant. So as soon as you decide, you can type in your answer. Okay, so we've got mostly classroom. Looks like so far it's unanimous for classroom functions. Okay, very good. Yes, I would agree. So the classroom lock, we can leave it unlocked when we have a delivery. We can unlock it with a key, but it's always going to be an authorized locking and unlocking. So we don't just have staff members that can leave it unlocked. It has to be by somebody that has a key. So I think classroom would be a good choice for that scenario. Okay, here's your next scenario. If you go ahead and read through that and then type your answer into chat. Okay, so the responses are coming in fast and furious. Looks like everyone is selecting privacy function for this one. Yeah, so this one got a little bit more information. So the customer is saying they should not require a key because this is just a conference room. So privacy, if they do in fact want privacy while the room is being used. So in a conference room, I would say that they might want to lock that to keep people from walking in the middle of the conference. All right, so we've got a choice for a classroom door. All right, So in this particular situation, we require some type of lock on a classroom door. We did talk about advantages and disadvantages of different functions. So we want to be able to have the outside lever locked without entering the hallway. We're going to have a key on the outside, obviously, to unlock the door, because we always want rescue personnel to be able to access the classroom from the outside. And we want to make sure that we have single motion egress. So based on those criteria, which of these three functions would you choose? Okay, so we got some responses coming in. Classroom security, we got a choice for office, classroom. All right, so classroom would not allow us to lock it from the inside. Remember, we want to be able to lock the door without entering the hallway. All right, and if you have experience with some that you might have recommended, we want to hear from you on that as well. Okay, so most of you have chosen a classroom security lock. And I would say that is pretty typical, locking and unlocking it from either side using a key. Now, we did have a situation in New Jersey where parents were suing the school board because their student ended up being attacked inside one of the classrooms by another student. So the two students were in the classroom, the teacher was not around, the bully locked the door from the inside because it had an office function installed, and that bully proceeded to beat up the student. So the parents were suing the school board saying that an office function was not the correct function to use on a classroom door, that there should have been a classroom security lock. So you see, we've got to take several things into consideration. We are choosing a function, and that is safety, security, and a certain level of convenience. So all those factors must be weighed when making a decision. The question is, did they win the case? I do not know what the outcome was on that particular case, Jim. Good question. All right, so we're going to move on to our next placeholder, and that would be when we have an electrified lock. Now, this is just electrified. There is a motor in there that will allow the lock to be locked and unlocked electrically. So you would see in the next placeholder either EL or EU. EL stands for electrically locked. Some of us think of that as being fail safe. So if you lose power, you can safely get through both sides of the door. EU would be electrically unlocked, and that would be fail secure. If you lose power, the lock remains in the locked position. And that would be appropriate for exterior doors, because if you ever lose power and if you don't have battery backup, the door would be left unlocked if you were using the electrically locked or fail-safe version. So that would be something to consider as well. All right, moving on, we go into our next placeholder, and that would be for the type of cylinder. So if you see P, which would be the most common, that would be the default. P would be for a patented Everest cylinder. It is a patent-protected design, so other manufacturers cannot produce that Everest cylinder and or the keys, so we can control against unauthorized key duplication. So P in that placeholder, that would be the default. You can see that we do have some other cylinder options available as well. Next placeholder would be for the latch type. If it's a passive set or non-locking function, you would have S in that place, meaning it is a spring latch, no deadlocking action. D, if it's a key locking function, would be for a dead latch to keep the latch from being slipped with a piece of plastic or a credit card. And here, once again, is a close-up view of the two different types. So a spring latch just has the large beveled latch itself. And for the locking function, here's that deadlocking feature that we talked about earlier. That part will be depressed when the door is closed. It'll hit the strike plate. And when that finger is pushed in by the strike plate, the larger latch itself is no longer spring-loaded. So that plays a very important role. Our next placeholder is going to be for the outside lever. We got a variety of different levers to choose from. The first three, Athens, Rhodes, and Sparta, would be the most common lever designs that we use. So you have a choice of lever designs. And here's some examples of the levers along with the roses. They're generally a match set. We have two different types of roses that will go along with the different lever designs. So here we can see the Athens rose and lever. You'll notice that this lever just travels straight across the face of the door. You'll notice this one has a bend or a return on it. So it's going to come to within 1/2 inch of the door. So there's a particular reason why that is used. So I would ask you, if you would please in chat, type why, where, or when you would use a lever with a return on it. What would be the purpose or the advantage of having the return on the lever? Any ideas? Anything with ADAT? I'm not sure. American with Disabilities Act? No. Quarter to pull ADA application? No. Good idea, but no, that is not why it's used. Single motion egress? Not exactly. I'll give you a little bit of a hint. It has to do with codes. California, John. Thank you, John. All right, so California codes do require the return on the door. Yes, that is correct. So it is one of the state codes. And that is designed, it'll do two things. It will help prevent somebody from getting their belt loop or pocket caught on the handle, maybe a purse strap. It also prevents a fire hose from getting caught behind that lever, inadvertently pulling down the lever. If there's fire raging on the other side of the door, opening the door, you'd get the backdraft effect. So that is designed to protect the lives of firefighters as well. So some consideration. Most architects will like the straight lever design. It's a little simpler, cleaner lines rather than going with the bend on the handle. All right, our next placeholder is going to be for the finishes. We do have a wide variety of finishes available. The satin chrome is probably going to be one of the most common and most durable finishes used for commercial applications. So you can see that we got a full range of finishes available for the levers. Okay, now we do have the option for the inside to have that different than the outside lever. That would be kind of unusual, but we can select a different inside lever design and a different finish on the inside lever. And this is where you would specify that. That's where that would occur in the nomenclature. All right, so here we have a lock where we've got pretty much a complete part number without any additional options. So we want to take a look at what this part number is comprised of. So if you would please, what do you think the ATH in this part number refers to? Okay, Matthew is saying Athens trim, Athens lever, the handle. Athens lever, yes, very good, thank you. That is the Athens lever being used on the outside location. Very good, so that is the outside lever design. How about the P as in Paul? Do you remember what the P refers to? Cylinder type, patented keying, patented Everest cylinder. 6-pin, yes, it does happen to be a 6-pin cylinder. All the commercial grade lock sets would come with a 6-pin cylinder. Yes, very good. So that would be the cylinder itself, the Everest patent protected design. How about the 626, 3-digit number? Finish, satin chrome. A lot of finishes, satin chrome. Again, yes, very good. That would be the satin chrome finish, and that would be specifically, if you don't specify, it would be on the inside and the outside lever. So that is the finish. Okay, so if we can kind of summarize, covered a lot of information on the ND series cylindrical lock set. Once again, this is a commercial grade 1 piece of hardware, grade 1 being the highest grade you can get, heavy duty commercial lock. It does meet the ANSI BHMA standard A156 0.2 for cycle testing, for security, for durability, for finishes. We've got over 31 different functions, although we only covered 5 or 6 of the most common type. There are a large variety of different functions to choose from. We've got 9 lever designs and 2 different roses to choose from, and 10 different finishes. So you can see there's a lot of choices when it comes to the ND series cylindrical lock set. And then we also talked about the fact that it is easier to install. The fact that you take 2 round holes, it's much quicker and easier to install than a mortise lock set would be. Okay, so we'll take a little break here for some questions. If you have some questions on the ND series lock set, if you go ahead and type those in. You mentioned that grade 1 locks far exceed minimum standards, 5 times your example. Do lower grades locks by Schlage also? Yes. So the lower grades would also exceed the minimum standards as well. Yes, that would be a good general statement to make. Yes, that all of the grades would exceed those minimum standards for a grade 1, 2, or 3. Why wouldn't I tell customers that grade 2 is enough to meet the requirements for the security grade 1? Well, don't forget, you also have, it's not just operationals, but it's also from a security or strength standpoint. So that would probably be a reason why you wouldn't want to recommend a grade 2 as opposed to a grade 1. I won't say you can never do it, but there are other factors other than just the longevity as far as cycle testing. You do have strength issues to consider as well. Now that may not, if you have a competitor whose lock set is a grade 2 and it only meets the minimum standards, that would be another consideration. Exterior entrance and so for an exterior entrance, yeah, it's going to be based on the number of cycles that you're looking for. Let's see, which locks are best for an exterior entrance taking Minnesota weather into consideration? Well, all locks are going to have some limitations as far as weather concerned, freezing conditions. I don't know that a grade 1 or a grade 2 would necessarily be any better from a weather standpoint. It has to do more with proper lubrication of the lock. I might say that a grade 1 and a grade 2 might perform similar when you're considering weather as a factor. Do you have a latch retraction feature for the L series? I'm not sure what you mean by latch retraction feature. If you're talking about a dead latch, I'm not sure what you mean by latch retraction. Would 6.2 finish work on an exterior opening? Yes. 626 would be a good choice. It is one of the most durable finishes. The satin chrome finishes hold up very well for exterior applications. Electric latch retraction? No, we do not have electric latch retraction. We have electric locking and unlocking. Yes, thank you, Jeff. Jeff is adding that it's not like an exit device. That is correct. Yep, it's only going to lock and unlock the device, and then you still have to push down on the handle. Yeah, there may be a manufacturer that does. I don't know if Security Distributors has a retrofit program for that. Okay, other questions that you have on the cylindrical lock set? Rick is typing a question here. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of great features that are associated with the ND series. Rick is saying, is there anything in the lever to prevent sag? Yes, it's the spring cage. The spring cage is designed, we specifically use torsion or compression springs rather, instead of torsion springs that some other manufacturers use. So a torsion spring has two little arms that stick out, and those arms tends to break off over time, which would cause the lever to sag. Because we use a coil compression spring, which has a large number of coils, that force is applied or spread out over the variety of coils, which makes the lever highly resistant to sagging. So it is the spring cage that will prevent the lever from sagging. And remember, you've got millions of cycles that are occurring before you're going to get any noticeable lever sag. Okay, thank you for those questions. Let's go ahead and continue on. We're going to the L series, and the L series is our mortise lock set, another heavy-duty commercial grade lock set. So that one is going to meet the ANSI BHMA standard A156.13. And this is going to follow a similar series of tests, both operational, security, strength. We're going to evaluate the material, test the finish for durability, resistance to UV rays, and that all-important cycle testing. All right, so for this one, once again, grade 1 is going to meet 1 million cycles of operation. Grade 2 would be 800,000 cycles of operation. Now for our L series lock on a grade 1 testing, there are over 29 individual tests that must be passed in order to meet the grade 1 standards. So just as in the ND series, the mortise lock is tested to failure as well. So for our L series lock set, it has been tested to over 7 million cycles of operation. So it can last up to 7 times as long as a lock set that only meets the minimum grade 1 standards. So let's see how that compares to something like a school bathroom door. So annual usage for your school bathroom door would be 1,250 cycles. So if we do some multiplication there, if we multiply that times 365 days a year, that's 456,000 cycles per year. So the grade 1 lock would be reached, if it was only 1 million cycles, be reached in 2 years and 2 months. So you may think to yourself, that's not a long time for a school restroom door, and that would be true. Now that's, keep in mind that Schlage would last up to 7 times as long as that. So you might get more than 14 years use out of a Schlage grade 1 mortise lock set. So grade 1 mortise locks are considered to be the heaviest duty locks that you can install on a door. And they do have a larger number of functions available. So let's jump into the L series nomenclature. So we start out with our first placeholder. L would be a standard mortise lock set, and LV would be known as vandal guard. And vandal guard is simply when the outside lever is locked, it will still move. So this will resist somebody standing on the lever to try and force it. The lever will move from horizontal to near vertical. That's known as vandal guard, sometimes called a clutching or free-floating action. After that, we talk about the case. Most of what we'll be talking about are going to be the 9, which is a lock case. 0 would indicate that it's dummy trim. No lock case, just matching trim, sometimes used on pairs of doors. Okay, next one, a placeholder is for a deadbolt. 0 would indicate there's no deadbolt being used. 1 would be dummy trim, and number 4 would be with a deadbolt. And here you can see an example. The one on the top is a latch bolt only, with a deadlocking action here. Here we have an example of a deadbolt in addition to the latch bolt. And this is one of the advantages, major advantages you get with a mortise lock that you do not get with a cylindrical lock, and that is the extra security provided by a deadbolt. And here's a placeholder for some of our functions, and once again, we're only going to cover the most common functions. 10 would be a passage set, 40 is privacy, 50 is office, 70 is classroom, 71 is classroom security, and 80 would be a storeroom lock set. All right, so we're going to start out with our classroom lock. So we've got a latch bolt will be retracted by lever from either side unless the outside is locked by a key on the outside. We've got an auxiliary latch bolt that deadlocks the latch bolt when the door is closed. The inside is always free for immediate egress. Okay, so here we have some examples, some icons that would match up with that description. So if you look at the pictures, you can reread the description of the functions of the operation. And if you would type into chat A, B, or C as to which picture represent that functionality. Okay, so we got a lot of folks typing in the letter C, as in Charles. Okay, so you are correct. C would be the correct answer. And you can see here that we have a cylinder on the outside. There is no thumb turn on the inside. So that would be an example where the key locks and unlocks the lever or the knob in this particular case from the outside. Okay, so here's another consideration. So just as in the cylindrical lock set, we do have a classroom security lock as well. So this one is going to be locked from either side by a key. So we got a key on both sides. We've got the auxiliary dead latch. The inside lever is always free for immediate egress. So we'll bring up the pictures again. So which picture do you think would reference that type of operation? Okay, so most of you are typing in the letter B. So we've got a key on both sides. Yes, so you are correct. So B would be the correct answer. So we have a key, a cylinder on both sides. Either key will lock and unlock the outside lever. Okay, very good on that. Okay, next we have our office function. That would be the 9050. So you've got the latch retracted by a lever from either side unless the outside is locked by either the key or the thumb turn. So this one we can lock it using a key on the outside or a thumb turn on the inside. It's going to remain locked until it's unlocked using a key or the thumb turn. So just going out the door will not unlock it. Inside is always free for immediate egress. Okay, so here are your pictures once again. So if you'd please select which one you think is the office function. Okay, so it looks like everybody has selected A, and that would be correct. So we've got a key on the outside, thumb turn on the inside. This one was only a latch bolt. We didn't talk about a deadbolt here. So A would be correct. All right. So here we have another scenario for you to respond into chat. So we've got a conference room that's being added. They're using mortise lock sets. Needs to be unlocked by a key on the outside. The lock should be able to lock the outside lever from the inside. So if you would type in the chat, what function would you recommend for this particular conference room? So we want a key on the outside, and we want to be able to lock it from the inside as well. So we got classroom security, the L9050. And Bruce has given us some choices here. Thank you, Bruce. Okay, so we've got some choices for a classroom. We've got some office coming in. Responses. Okay, so keep in mind, we want to be able to lock this from the inside. Okay, so I think we would go with the B would be a good choice, the office lock, because that's going to have a thumb turn on the inside. So that would be our #1 recommendation. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about indicators. Now, this is another major advantage of a mortise lock set over a cylindrical lock set. The fact that we have indicator plates, these can be used either on the outside or the inside of the door. So typically they'd be used on the outside of the door if the door is a restroom. It would indicate that the restroom is occupied. They can also be used on the inside of a classroom to indicate that the door has been successfully locked from the inside. So it would say locked or unlocked in that particular case. Because remember, with a cylindrical lock, when you lock it from the inside, there's no way to verify the teachers have turned the key correctly and that the outside lever is in fact locked. So the indicator plate would be very helpful, very good pairing up with a classroom security function. Does not come with it automatically. This window here is going to change status when you turn the key and lock the outside lever. You'll notice that we do use red and white as opposed to red and green because some individuals are colorblind. So we use the red and the white as our indicator colors. All right, our next placeholder is going to be for the cylinder itself, and it's going to be very similar to what we looked at for the cylindrical lock sets. So P is going to indicate the default cylinder. That is going to be a patent-protected design. Every cylinder protects against unauthorized key duplication. Large variety of different lever designs, more so than we had than the cylindrical lock set, and there's more that we have that are just illustrated here. Once again, you've got a similar type of situation where you could come with a lever that just goes straight across the door. Here would be one of our more common ones right here. And then we have the levers that have the return on them as well to meet the California codes. Now, because it's a mortise lock set, we do have some options when it comes to the trim. We can go with either a one-piece trim design, which is known as an escutcheon plate. That would be the letter B here. And then we have A for the rose design. So this would be known as a two-piece design. And this is probably a more modern look, cleaner look. Most architects will go for the two-piece design. The escutcheon plate is going to be used typically when you're in a retrofit situation. You're either trying to match existing hardware on the door, or if you're trying to cover up some existing holes, if you are retrofitting from one manufacturer's lock to another. Okay, so here we have our placeholders for the lever design, the rose, the escutcheon, and the finish. This would be for the inside lever. So once again, you can now get different inside lever finish if you choose to. That would be fairly unusual, however. Okay, so now we got an overview of the part numbers. Let's see if we can apply this information. So we got an L9071P12A626. So what does the 12 tell us? What does the 12 tell us? Okay, so Monica is saying the lever. Most of you are saying lever design. Yes. So 12 would in fact be the lever. That is correct. Okay, does this lock have a rose or an escutcheon? Oh, very good. Everybody's saying that that has a rose. All right, so that would be considered a two-piece design. Good job. Okay, does the lock have a vandal guard feature? Do you remember what was the indicator for vandal guard? Okay, yes, LV is the vandal guard indication, so this does not contain the letter V. So this would not be a vandal guard design. Very good. Okay, so that summarizes the L series. So once again, this is a heavy-duty commercial grade 1 lock. It is certified by ANSI BHMA to meet the grade 1 standards. It does far exceed the grade 1 standards of 1 million cycles. We've got an extensive list of configurations or options available. There are 50 standard mechanical functions. We've got some specialty functions as well. 14 finishes, 33 levers, 2 knobs, 5 roses, and 3 escutcheon designs to choose from. In addition to that, you get the security of a deadbolt. You also get the option of an active indicator that can be used either on the inside or the outside. Okay, so Jim is saying, can locks without a vandal guard option be opened by forcing the lever? It would be unlikely, Jim, because the L-Series mortise lock has what's known as a breakaway or a twist-off spindle. So the handle will most likely twist off before they damage the internal component parts and before they gain entry into the building. So we've got some additional features there. So yeah, you're not relying just on vandal guard. We have a twist-off feature for the spindle as well. So lots of security there with the L-Series lock. You have a lot of durability, a lot of protection against force and vandalism, and long life expectancy. Jim is saying it's his go-to. Yeah, if I was an institution, an end user, I would always select a grade 1 mortise lock over cylindrical lock if I had money in my budget and the doors were prepped for it, because we get many more options and it's going to last even longer than the cylindrical lock set. Okay, we're going to move into our deadbolts next. So deadbolts are designed to provide additional security on the door. So these are often referred to as auxiliary lock. So they can provide extra security for certain doors, like exterior doors or things like gates, areas in common use areas. But we do have to be careful when we're using these, because keeping in mind that doors in the path of egress have to be operable with one motion. So doors in the path of egress, one motion. So you can't have a latch lock and a deadbolt on those particular doors, because you'd have to have 2 different operations to exit. All right, so on the deadbolt, you can see that we've got some features here where we've got a 1-inch throw on the deadbolt, which provides security against spreading the door and the frame apart. We have security collars that resist wrenching. We've got a shield that protects against ice pick attacks. So there are a wide variety of features that are available to provide that physical security in the deadbolts. All right, so we're going to go through our part numbering sequence here. So B6, for example, would be the lock series, and we've got several different types of locks within the B series. There's some minor variations within the series itself. Then 60 would be the functions. So some examples of functions would be single cylinder, key on the outside, thumb turn on the inside. Double cylinder would be key on both sides. Those would be examples of some of the lock functions that we have for deadbolts. P, once again, I think we know that one. That's going to be the P for the security, the patent protected cylinder. Every cylinder included in that design. Next would be the screw suffix. You can get some security screws that will resist removal. Somebody's trying to take the lock off the door. Vandal resistance. Next 3 numbers, digits, would be for the outside finish. 626 would be an example of a satin chrome finish. 613 would be the inside finish. Once again, dual finishes are available. All right, so for the Schlage commercial grade 1 deadbolts, once again, they meet the ANSI BHMA standards for grade 1. We talked about the 1-inch throw deadbolt. They've got hardened steel rollers inside to resist hacksawing attacks. We provide the locks with a high security strike plate, long screws that'll reach to the 2x4 behind the trim work to protect against kick and attack. And then we even include hardened steel ball bearings that go in front of the mounting screws to prevent somebody from drilling the mounting screws off the door to gain entry. So lots of security on the deadbolts. Now, we are seeing some code requirements that say that on certain classroom doors, and this would be for existing installations where they can add a deadbolt to some classroom doors, that would require 2 operations to exit the classroom, but they cannot be simultaneous retraction method. So you can't require two hands used simultaneously to retract latches. You could use a deadbolt, retract the deadbolt with one hand, then move your hand down to the latch, cylindrical or mortise lock, to retract the latch on the door. So we are seeing some of that being allowed in certain jurisdictions. Always the authority having jurisdiction, the local fire marshal, will make the final determination as to whether or not he would approve the use of deadbolts on classroom doors. Matthew is asking, would corridor function work with that? Gate in a pool area, corridor function. Let's see if we get some clarifications there. Yeah, you can use, what I've seen on pools is a double cylinder tubular latch lock. The deadbolts also come with a latching function. So I've sometimes seen that used on a pool gate that would have a key on both sides of the gate. You could also use, if you're using a cylindrical lock, you could use an asylum function that has a key on both sides of the door. Both sides would always be rigid. Key would only momentarily retract the latch. Corridor function referring to classroom with single egress motion. Yes, you could use a corridor function on a classroom. I have seen that being used. All right, well, let's take a look at some scenarios and apply some of the knowledge that we've learned today. All right, so let's kind of summarize why you would choose, or why you might choose mortise or cylindrical locks, why you might choose one over the other. All right, so for cylindrical locks, you have ease of installation. You have a slightly lower cost for cylindrical lock sets. Obviously, if your doors are already prepped for a cylindrical lock set, you would most likely go with a cylindrical lock set. Otherwise, you'd have to use some bulky, unattractive filler plates, and it wouldn't provide for a very good looking installation. You might have cylindrical locks in use just because a facility or a technician just has a personal preference. Maybe that's something that they are used to. They feel that the ease of installation, less labor required to install them, would make them an advantage. So certainly the lower price point and the ease of installation, fewer holes being drilled on the door, a little bit more universal as far as the hole size and spacing on a cylindrical lock. Mortise locks, there's a wider variety of retrofit holes that you would have to consider. So those would be some of the reasons why you might sell or select a cylindrical lock set. Now, as far as mortise lock sets are concerned, if you want the heaviest duty lock available, you would go with a mortise lock set. If you want the widest variety of functions, you would go with a mortise lock. If you're interested in going with the extra security of a deadbolt, you would go with a mortise lock. And if you like the idea of having an indicator plate, either on a restroom to show whether it's occupied or not, or if you want the indicator on a classroom security function, mortise lock would be your choice as well. So if you want the lock that lasts the longest, that has the highest number of cycle testing, you would go with a mortise lock as well. So those would be the two criteria I would use in selecting those. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the functions that we might use here. We've got a storage closet that has a passage lock on it. Closet's now being used to store employee personnel files, okay? So what lock might you recommend for that storage area? Okay, so we got some responses coming in already. We've got the ND80 storeroom. Yes, if you're not familiar with the model numbers, storeroom is in fact the ND80 model. Yes, so I think storeroom would be a good choice for that storage closet. Locked at all times. So when you use a key on a storeroom lock, remember it just momentarily retracts the latch. As soon as you take the key out, it relocks. You cannot leave it in the unlocked mode. All right, let's try this one. We've got a human resource office. It's being remodeled, and she needs to be able to lock the door when conversations are being had. Currently using a mortise lock, which one of these three would you recommend? Okay, so we got some choices for the 90-50, 90-40, privacy. We've got to vote for a privacy set here. Okay, so I would agree. You could go with a privacy or an office function, depending on whether or not the customer actually wants to have unlocking with the use of the key from the outside. Okay, so we got a classroom door. Let's see here. So we get our animations going here. So we've got a classroom door. They're updating their classroom doors. Needs to make sure that the hallway side of the door can be locked without the teacher entering the hallway. All right, so basically we want to be able to lock this door from the inside without the having to step outside into the hallway. And we've got listing for both the mortise and cylindrical lock sets. Okay, so it looks like we've got some choices for the ND70, or 75 rather, and the L9071. Yes, so I would agree. I would think the classroom security would be exactly what we're looking for this scenario. Okay, so now here we've got some restroom locks. They obviously need to provide security, but we also want to have some additional feedback when those restrooms are in use. So what would you recommend on a restroom door? Okay, looks like we're going with the 90-40 privacy lock with indicator. Very good. So keep in mind that's only available with the mortise lock set. We do not have that option available for the cylindrical lock set. Okay, very good. All right, good job. Okay, so we've got some additional resources for you. We've got our ND and L series catalogs and service manuals that you can check out. We've got some great videos as well if you want a little bit more information on the mortise and cylindrical locks. We've got some online courses. How do you do the Schlage workout? Bruce has opened up a file that you can download these resources. We've got a blog, idighardware.com, that will give you great information on life safety codes. It's written by Lori Green, an Allegiant employee, who's considered to be the expert in codes. And we also have a customer care number. If you ever need immediate technical support when you're out in the field, that number will get you in touch with our tech support specialists. We also have a certificate for you. You can download that as well. You can type in your name and the date, print that out for yourself. We also have a survey for you to complete. We would very much appreciate if you complete that survey. This will tell us how we're doing with our webinars, if you have any suggestions for improving the webinars, or if there's any additional webinars you'd like to see in the future, you can let us know that as well. All right, so that's going to complete today's webinar. We'll hang out for a couple minutes. If you have any additional questions, give you an extra time to download those files. And I want to thank you all very much for your participation and your attendance in this webinar today on Schlage locks. Thank you all so much.